Hey, it's Jeff Hyman, your startup therapist, where we focus on the people part of startups. There's potentially no more important part of people in the context of a startup than leadership, and there's potentially no better person to talk about it than Carter Cast. Hey, Carter.
Hi, Jeff.
How are you?
I'm well, thank you.
Good. Before we get into leadership in startups, I want to set this up by letting people know a little about you because you just couldn't be more qualified to talk about this. You built a great career at PepsiCo, climbed through the ranks quickly. Then you joined Walmart.com. The first time Walmart was putting together their e-commerce venture, you became CEO of that venture. Left Walmart to become head of Hayneedle, a very successful e-commerce company. Spent time at Blue Nile as well, the online diamond website. Then you switched sides and you're a venture capitalist at Pritzker Group in Chicago, and also, if that's not enough, a professor of entrepreneurship and new venture formation at the Kellogg School at Northwestern University. Did I encapsulate that pretty accurately?
At PepsiCo, because I didn't understand one of my own self-sabotaging behaviors.
Would you be willing to share on video right now for the first time what was that derailer? What set you off course?
Okay. I had a propensity when I was impeded by my manager, whether it was bureaucracy or micromanaging, if I was being impeded on activating, because I have a real high twitch activation need, which is probably why I ended up going into an entrepreneurial setting later, when I would butt up against some of the bureaucracy or someone who was a strong micromanager, I tended to get irreverent, and I tended to try to go around the authority figure, kind of circumnavigate them instead of working through the system.
So you basically said, I'm not gonna waste my time on this guy, and you.
Yeah, I'm gonna go around him.
Yeah.
I'll find a way, and I'm gonna find another way to get this done. And in the academic research, this is called a self-sabotaging behavior, which is called. There's 11 of them, according to a guy named Robert Hogan, who's done a ton of research on this. And one of them is called being mischievous. And this mischievous gene is sort of like, high excitement type of a person who likes a lot of stimulation. And if they get thwarted, they find a way to get around it.
It sounds a lot like an entrepreneur.
Well, what's funny is, so I kept having to, when I finally kind of underailed, when I finally got back on track, because I had a good boss, frankly, who counseled me a lot, and I learned to sort of self-monitor in certain situations that were charged, where the air was charged.
Yep.
And so, I got back on track, and I was careful. What happened was, once I left corporate life and went into startups and early stage companies, that derailment propensity, was muted.
Sure.
Or died down.
So looking at it from the opposite lens, should people not become entrepreneurs if they don't have that gene, that deficiency? Is that something that you found in your research to be actually necessary to be a successful entrepreneur, that level of mischievous?
Oh, not necessarily. It's a good question. I mean, there are certain traits, I believe there's certain traits, and I'm sure you see them, of good entrepreneurs.
So let's have them. Well, you're a award-winning Kellogg professor. Tell founders who watch this video, what characteristics do they need to have and should they emphasize?
Yeah, well, I think number one, number two, number three is you have to have passion for the problem you're solving. You have to be a believer. You
can't be doing it for the money. You got to be doing it because you're genuinely passionate.
There's got to be intrinsic motivation, not extrinsic like status and power. I mean, it's good to want to make money, and it's no problem having a high power bias, but you've got to be doing it because you believe that this problem is worth solving, and you can see the line to solving it. Because if you have that, in those dark nights of the soul, if you have that passion and you have that sense of purpose, and it's intrinsically motivated, then you'll have the drive to take the gut punches that we all get as entrepreneurs.
It keeps you going. It sustains you through those tough times, those dark nights.
Yeah.
What other things have you learned?
So that's first.
Yeah, please, the others.
I would say the second one goes right along with it. It's resilience. I believe that the passion and the purpose, helps you have this tough rhino hide and allows you to keep persevering and being resilient when you, as you know, you constantly get said no to. I mean, how many times did you pitch and you were said no to?
My first startup, I got turned down more than 90 times before I got one investor to give us a term sheet.
That's unbelievable. And you kept, but you believed in what Retrofit was doing.
Well, this wasn't Retrofit. This was my first startup, but I was so stupid that I just kept going. I mean, part of it is just total belief in what you're doing, but at the same time, and I'm interested in your take on this, Carter, listening to feedback and being somewhat flexible about the feedback that you're getting. I think it's a very tough balance, right? Entrepreneurs that can listen and take feedback yet remain true to their vision.
Yeah, and you said it. That's a razor's edge.
Right.
You know, one of the things that's interesting in some of the incubators is, I believe personally, some of the incubators, they get so much feedback.
Yeah.
These entrepreneurs get so much feedback.
Drives you crazy.
You can see, their head is swimming, and I think they've got to be careful not to try to please everybody.
Yeah. So let's fast forward a bit to a company that's up and running. The founders have made the decision to pull the trigger and go. You've been a founder and an entrepreneur. You've invested. You've taught. What mistakes do entrepreneurs make with regard to leadership, leading people, whether you got 5 summer interns or 500 full-time people? What are the most common moves you see over and over when it comes to leadership that would make the difference if the entrepreneur did it differently?
I think there are 2. There might be many. 2 come to mind. One is there's a need for absolute control. So you become an entrepreneur probably because you don't like being stepped on by the man.
Much like your description at Pepsi. Yep.
Like myself. And I think your ability to take the direction you spoke of, you have to be open-minded and listen for the gem in people's feedback and not be so hell-bent on realizing your vision at the exclusion of other people's constructive criticism.
So you're gonna tell me Mark Zuckerberg and Steve Jobs took input from people? Is that what you would have people believe? Or are they the exception to the rule, and as I tell people, you ain't Steve Jobs?
You know, we've called on Jobs at Walmart 3 or 4 times. I met with them, and actually he listened very carefully to the Walmart executive team. He asked a lot of good questions, and he sat and nodded and listened. You know, I think there's a certain amount of mystique around these characters.
Sure.
But, you know, they didn't get to be where they are by not seeking counsel. I mean, you know that Mark Zuckerberg listened to Jim Breyer and Sheryl Sandberg and a host of others who have very specific expertise.
So from the context of mistakes, how does an entrepreneur find that right balance, Carter, between listening and taking input, yet not being all over the map and willy-nilly and doing what everyone tells them to do? How do you find that balance?
Yeah, it's hard. I think one thing you can do is you have to understand your non-negotiables. Mm-hmm. I think if you understand what got product market fit, how you achieved that, how you created something that resonates, and you understand the secret sauce of what are the differentiators that led to this need, your ability to get the Series A funding, let's say.
Yeah.
Or whatever it is.
Yeah.
Your ability to start scaling was contingent upon the idea resonating with some customer and fulfilling some need. If you can tease out exactly what that formula is, you know, your ability at Blue Nile to get that man buying was because we guided him well with content and a diamond search tool and gemologists on the phone. If you stay true to some of the core principles of why it's working.
So you have to be mindful about taking a step back to figure out the formula. If the formula is working, why is the formula working, and stick with it? On the other hand, if the formula is not working, how do I get input to change the formula?
Yeah, and if, you know, even when the formula is working, there's always a few components that are core to the proposition. You know, Walmart, source cheaply.
Yep.
You know, source cheaply, make sure the stores are clean,
Yeah.
and get them through checkout.
Right.
And then a lot of the other things that you can be flexible on. But understand what you don't want to be flexible on that's core to why the customers love you.
Can you give guidance to founders early on how to figure out those things that are working? How do I figure out my formula, my success formula? Am I talking to customers? Am I talking to my board or investors? Am I just doing soul searching? Do I read books? How do I figure it out?
Well, one of the better books I've read that I love to quote is by Clayton Christensen, who's, The Innovator's Dilemma, wonderful professor out of Harvard. And he wrote a book called The Innovator's DNA, and he looked at 5,000 CEOs, some of them early stage startup people, some of them later stage CEOs. And he asked them a ton of questions and then ran a regression and found out that the discovery-oriented CEOs were different than the delivery-oriented CEOs. The delivery-oriented guys were good at communication, analysis, execution, planning, and organization. The discovery-oriented ones were exceptionally well at a few things. Questioning, why does a computer need a fan?
Yeah.
Why does a computer have to look so rigid? Why can't we round it off and make it look happier?
Right.
Questioning, experimenting. This is like Bezos. Always A/B testing.
So
always being out in the market, prototyping.
Right.
MPVs, A/B testing. And I think that's, to answer your question, the best entrepreneurs are really good at getting customer feedback all the time.
Especially early on in the venture.
Especially early on.
Yeah.
Being very focused, externally focused on what the customer's saying and observing them in their natural habitat, like Jane Goodall with the apes.
Yeah. As you say that, Carter, I see a connection to a great sales professional. Most salespeople go in, they show up and throw up and list all their features, and they pounce on the customer. Why aren't you buying this thing? Great sales professionals are very consultative. They spend 80% of the time asking questions from the prospective customer. Tell me about your business. What are your challenges? How does that work? Why do you pick that? And by the end of that discussion, you're able to just articulate to the customer another way. You almost lead the customer to their own conclusion. What you're describing as an entrepreneur is very much the same. You're an endless questioning of all these things.
I couldn't agree more. And it was actually played out. Adam Grant, a professor out of Penn, wrote a book called Give and Take.
Mm-hmm.
And he said exactly his research showed exactly what you just said, that the best sales performers sought to understand, not be understood first.
Sure. Unfortunately it's rare, but it totally works. And you're saying the same for entrepreneurs. Have your vision, but don't just.
I think you've got to constantly be monitoring and getting. You can never believe your own press. You always have to be seeking to understand how you're performing with your customers.
Let's switch topics a bit to entrepreneurs with regard to their teams, true leadership of their teams. What are some of the big mistakes you've seen around building the team, hiring, firing, the structure, compensation, things like that? Really give us some good tactical, useful information that founders can use today.
I think one of the first things I would say about team is that this is scary. A lot of these people have left good jobs with benefits and nice high salary bases and equity to come and join your crusade. And they're scared and they're worried. And so I think a lot of times founders don't spend enough time being transparent with their own employees. Mm-hmm. So they know you flew out there and talked to a potential customer, and then you come back in the office and start cranking. And everybody's looking at you wondering how that big sales meeting went, and you're cruising along through your day. Right away, get back, pull everybody together, and do an informal, here's what happened,
right.
Here's what they like about our product, here's what they don't like, here's what we got to do now.
Okay, but let's talk honestly about the hard stuff. If the meeting went great, no problem. Let's say the founder comes back from a bad customer meeting, a bad investor meeting. We didn't get the funding. The pressure's on by the board. How transparent are you with your team? How much can you share? Because you got to run the balance of not demotivating them, to your point.
Yeah.
They're already scared, and you're going to make them more scared. So how do you find that balance of transparency but discretion?
I erred on the side of transparency. Whenever I was in this position at Blue Nile, when we were having a hard time getting funding after the crash in '01.
You're that old?
And,
oh my God, are you old?
At Walmart, when things were challenging between Bentonville and San Francisco, where Walmart.com was located, I would always err on the side of being transparent. Yes, you show some tact. You definitely make sure you end with a positive or end with a lesson learned that you can then take out and activate.
Yep.
Look, we didn't get the sale, but they said 3 very useful things that are going to make our product better.
Got it.
Here's what they told me.
So you don't just put a turd on the table.
I believe that.
You put the turd on the table for the team, but you also but then you also say, here's what we can get out of it.
You know why? Employees are smart. These are smart people. They sense it. They see it. So fear of the unknown is worse than anything.
So treat them.
So by going in and saying we didn't get the Series A funding, but I learned some valuable information from the meeting that's going to make us have a better company.
What about hiring and firing? Biggest mistakes or lessons learned with regard?
Hold on too long. This is a lesson I learned. My old boss. I was trying to save somebody. This director of marketing. I was trying so hard to help her, and it was going on a long time. And my boss at the time said, "Carter, I've never fired someone too quickly.
Yeah.
I've only fired someone too slowly.
Yeah.
If it's not working for them either. They're unhappy. They're struggling too. Once you know what you know, and once you've actually been fair, you've documented it, you've counseled them verbally and written, move forward if it's not working."
So the lesson for the founder is they're actually doing the individual a favor by having that difficult come to Jesus discussion. And instead of feeling badly about it and saying, I have to fire you, part of it is an honest discussion, an intellectually honest discussion about this is not the right home for you. Let me work with you to try to introduce you to other people or find a better home for you. Is that kind of what you're saying?
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to sound Pollyannish, because it hurts no matter what.
Yeah.
But I would say, the conversation is, how do you think this is going? How is it really going?
So you ask them the question.
Yeah. I mean, 8 times out of 10, they say, I'm struggling and I'm not having any fun.
Yeah.
And you say, well, I see you're not having fun, and we don't think this is a fit. How can I help you find a better place for you? And what's happened many times when I see people that we've had to let go for one reason or another, you see them a year or two later and they say, God, I'm glad I got out of there. Thanks for giving me the push because it wasn't working for me either.
Yeah. I've had the same discussion.
That can't sound overly optimistic, but I think you've got to, when you know what you know, act on it, because the biggest mistake is trying to fix people that fundamentally aren't a fit for your company.
Yeah. Before we wrap up, you're a venture capitalist when you're not teaching at Kellogg, at Pritzker Group, which is one of the top VC firms in Chicago. Give us one inside scoop for entrepreneurs when the VCs are sitting around the table and you're talking about a startup, an entrepreneur, whether you've invested or not invested, a very common mistake that you see that doesn't have to be made, that the entrepreneur could absolutely do differently, that would make the difference from an investor's perspective.
Well, when they're coming in and trying to secure money, it's almost always the same thing. When it isn't going well, they don't realize that it's a dance, and they've got to engage us as a dancing partner. They come in and do a Phil Spector wall of sound on us, and but you're trying to jump in, you're trying to get the dance going, you want to do a little mambo, and nothing's happening. The best ones do what you said. They come in, and within 3 or 2 minutes, they've asked us a question, and they get us engaging in a dialogue, and they disseminate their information through the form of almost a dialogue versus a monologue. So
what you're saying is, again, it's almost a sales type of discussion where I'm engaging you, asking you questions as the prospective investor. Have you looked at this category? What are some of the things that have been missing from the startups that you've looked at? Is there something holding you back in this particular category? I think we might have figured it out. We might have the solution. And you engage the investor versus showing up and throwing up with your PowerPoint deck. Is that?
Yeah, and that's exactly right. And I've seen you do this really well, Jeff, because I've been on the other side. I've seen you come in and find some shared knowledge or find some point that you can start a conversation instead of just talking at people.
Great. Well, this has been very, very insightful. How can people learn more about you, your work, Carter? How can they get in touch? Maybe get into Kellogg and take your class, which I know is overbooked.
Well, you know what we've done, Jeff? My partner is David Schoenthal. We do a lot of teaching together. He works at IDEO, and he's a professor at Kellogg. And we created a website that is free, and it's not private or locked. And we've put a lot of the material from our class on the website.
Great.
So if people are interested, go to thebestnextthing.com. The best, not the next best thing, because I didn't want to pay for that URL. So it's thebestnextthing.com, and you'll just see a lot of our blogs and a lot of the material from our class.
Great. And there's a way to get in touch with you there.
Yeah.
Fantastic. Carter, terrific stuff. Thank you so much for your leadership and for sharing all the things you've learned along the way.
My pleasure, Jeff.
Take care.